Does employer brand matter? Is really a great question to be asking. And I think it puts it back on the company. I obviously am going to tell you that, yes, of course, it does matter for all of the reasons that we can see how an employer brand perception or crisis can affect a company's bottom line. Look at Target last year. We saw that they had a complete DEI crisis, a failure in communications, kind of a disconnect with their own employee culture, and their stock price still has not recovered a year later. So overall brand and, kind of the customer brand, the marketing, the traditional brand that we think of is no longer separate from employer brand. These things are interlinked. Everyone's reading candidate and employee stories just as much as they are enjoying the product that a company may make or a service the company may provide. So employer brand's no longer that little spigot you can turn off and on when hiring freezes come or hiring spikes occur. Like, it is something that is integral to your overall company's brand reputation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10X Recruiting, brought to you by MetaView. Sile, it's like 10:30 at night, dude. Why are you on a podcast?
Love it, man. Just anything I can do to spend time with you. Well, it's the way it should be, right? Me working at all hours, you at a time that's like perfectly convenient in your day. This is exactly the way it's supposed to be.
To be clear, you rescheduled this twice.
Yeah, that's true.
So today we talked to Kelly McCann, who has done employer branding for mega brands that you've heard of, places like Amazon, Robinhood, Booking.com. It's our first time we've had someone who's an employer branding specialist on the pod. Sal, what were your takeaways?
I think employer brand has always been important, obviously, but I think it's going to go to the next level in terms of when sort of the challenge is no longer being able to find people, because obviously AI is really good at finding people on the internet. The challenge is more going to be about attracting the right people to your company. It's just going to become, I think, a real, very tasteful science that people are going to have to get really great at. So yeah, great episode for that reason. My biggest takeaway was, and I've been hearing this in a bunch of other contexts as well, which we'll jam in a second, is just making sure it's clear what your brand isn't. I think we're going into a time when making sure you're repelling the right people is just as important as making sure you're attracting the right people. I was actually just on a call before this call with Bryce, who who I've met through you, Nolan, and she was talking about how the company she's working with at the moment, they actually do an unsell stage where just before the final interview stage, they do an unsell. So it's sort of similar for that. Like, make sure it's clear that in your employer brand, who shouldn't be applying for a role. I think that's like a really, really good takeaway. And also, of course, makes the actual brand much more poignant as well if you do that. So I think that's a great takeaway.
I had a couple takeaways. My first one is kind of the dirty game of employer branding is way more interesting than I thought. So we went down this path of talking about Glassdoor reviews. I didn't know this, but apparently you can highlight words that candidates are using in their reviews for flagging from Glassdoor and immediately have those reviewed. And that's kind of the insider track to how you get stuff taken off of Glassdoor, which she gets into this very clearly, which is not the right way to do it. But I was I had no idea that was the case. And I've been in this game for a long time. The other, point B of the dirty game of employer branding is the great place to work stuff, guys. If you are going, oh my God, they got a great place to work, they just paid for it. There is no actually nobody's saying oh my God, this is the best place to work. It's completely manufactured, 100% bullshit. Don't fall for it. I actually think it's a negative signal if a company has it. Who cares? No one's falling for that thing. But the last piece for me is, to your point, Sile, I think it's going to be one of the most important differentiators moving forward. Everybody says they want top talent and talent dense teams. How do you do that? And right now we're looking at some of these companies that are doing Cursor only has a couple hundred people. Everyone knows Cursor has great people. How do we know that? Well, they're pretty good at their branding. And it's different than it was in the past. It's not just endless marketing of, nonsense. It's these are the things that we're working on. We'll have a reporter come into our office and report on how our teams get work done. So there's this unique angle of it today that I think is different than what we've seen in the past for employer branding, that now people are going to have to start to get creative on this topic. Because if you really want the best talent, to your point, you have to repel them, the ones you don't want, but you also have to really attract those that you do, because there are endless options in this era of AI.
And it's a circle, right? Because the reality is, to attract the people you want, they almost want to know that you're repelling the people that they don't want to work with. It's sort of, it goes hand in hand. On that Glassdoor thing though, just as people don't care about Best Place to Work awards, which I agree, do people really care about Glassdoor scores?
We talked about this. So that's what I said. I feel I haven't looked at Glassdoor in 10 years. And I think I'm an outlier on that topic. I think people still do look at it. And if there are flags or trends, they're going to at least bring it up in the interview process. So I think for me, it's like you should be aware any aspect of your brand and how it's being reflected publicly. But it's not just Glassdoor, right? There's Blind, which is the cesspool of humanity, in my opinion. And so it's like all of these places to where now employees do have a voice and can talk about things, especially in an anonymized way. Because like, Sal, how do your employees talk trash about you? Of course they talk to each other, but like that's where they go and smear you.
I had a candidate today, actually, that funny enough, check out Glassdoor and said that apparently I was very popular with the team. So what can I say?
That makes one of us. Well, let's get to it. So without further ado, here is my episode with Kelly. This is 10X Recruiting, a podcast from MetaView. Let's get after it. What's up, Kelly? It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Nolan. How are things?
Things are good here. We were just talking before we started recording that sadly you were born into being a Seahawks fan, which I think is horrendous. You guys are going to the Super Bowl. You were rubbing it in my face. I've been crying. Things are not good here, but I'm happy. Actually, I'm not happy for you. I'm unhappy for you.
Well, I think I presented it way nicer than that. But yes, we will be at the Super Bowl. I'm very excited. I hope we kick the Patriots' butt. Yeah, Seattle is a buzz. I'm very stoked. And once again, if the situation were reversed, I would be excited for you.
Yeah, whatever. Like that's peak virtue signaling. So good for you. Good for you. Let me give the audience the background on how you and I became homies. So I've known Matt Stevenson for a super long time. He is at Bain as a talent partner there. Matt was on the pod last year, one of our best episodes. And so at the end of the year, we reached out to folks and we're like, hey, who should we talk to? And Matt had mentioned your name. And so for people who don't know about you, you're a recruiting branding specialist, which I think right now is kind of an under-discussed topic. You've been at mega places like Amazon, Walmart, Robinhood. And so what we're going to get into today and why I think this is interesting for people is actually recruiting brand is super, super important. But like when to do it, how to do it, what to do, I think are all the things I want to get into with you. So here's where I want to start is you walk into a company, nothing is figured out with recruiting brand. Everyone's like yelling at each other. Everyone thinks it's like the other person's problem because like that's how it was when I was thinking about this. What do you do? Like, what does a recruiting brand person do and how do you bring a brand to life?
Well, I think for anyone who might be unfamiliar with it, like recruiting brand, talent brand, employer brand, whatever that has come up in the company as being defined as, we are marketers at our core. Like we kind of take the parts of marketing that they think are unsexy. Like I'm here to make recruiting and talent attraction look sexy and fun. And I think the core of why this department has come up and really regained a lot of importance is there are so many companies with a great or unique internal culture that for whatever reason, they can't articulate externally. They don't really know how to tell that internal lore, if you will, to their external audience that would be so excited to come and join that or build that or join that organization. So, you can have all of that great stuff built into your culture, but if you can't tell that story, if you can't market it appropriately to top talent, they're going to go somewhere else. So when I first joined a company, I really, I'm coming fresh off of the candidate side of the equation. Like I'm fresh off of interviews. I've already been through all the candidate touch point funnels. So I've seen all the points in the process that either are super broken, could be improved, or that just don't even distinguish the company from anyone else in Silicon Valley or any other retailer on High Street, whatever the case may be. So I'm doing a full-on diagnostic of all customer-facing channels to see like what they could be optimizing to better, sell their unique offer to candidates. So that could be career site, social media profile, all their Glassdoor, Blind, and Reddit reviews. Like what are kind of those stories that are out there that, maybe counter to what their mission statement or value statements look like. And then also, again, taking in my own very recent candidate experience, what do those recruitment funnels look like? What are the email messagings going out? What do those notification sequence cadences look like? Have I been left in the lurch for 3 weeks? Am I the only one following up? Like, how can these things be improved to actually create the candidate experience that a great employee may be having with the company, but the candidates are really experiencing something very different?
So I want to talk about stage and size of company. We'll kind of get to that next. But where I want to start is like aligning people internally. People have different perspectives on talent recruiting brand. And so I'll present a couple of the ones that I've heard throughout the course of my career. So one is like the CEO who literally wants to find and terminate anyone who's left a low Glassdoor rating, to like the head of talent who's like, we're competing against companies that have way bigger brands, probably even better products, but competing for the same talent. And so we have to like invest in this in order to win. To like hiring managers who are like, does any of this shit matter? Like, who really cares? Like, let's just like go interview people. So how do you think about these different stakeholders with these different pre-existing beliefs? And what do you do to get them aligned?
I think that last question that we spoke about earlier was just so important. And I don't think anyone said it that bluntly in some time. But does employer brand matter? Is really a great question to be asking. And I think it puts it back on the company, and they can, I think that really shows up in different ways across each company. I obviously am going to tell you that, yes, of course, it does matter for all of the reasons that, we can see how an employer brand perception or crisis can affect a company's bottom line. Look at Target last year. We saw that they had a complete DEI crisis, a failure in communications, kind of a disconnect with their own employee culture, and their stock price still has not recovered a year later. So overall brand and, kind of the customer brand, the marketing, the traditional brand that we think of is no longer separate from employer brand. These things are interlinked. Everyone's reading candidate and employee stories just as much as they are enjoying the product that a company may make or a service the company may provide. So that's one thing I'll say, just kind of blanket statement across all companies, is employer brand's no longer that like little spigot you can turn off and on when hiring freezes come or hiring spikes occur. Like, it is something that is integral to your overall company's brand reputation. Now, I think obviously employer brand matters all the time, but when companies genuinely can communicate who they are internally, externally, I think that's also a big factor. Kind of what I was saying earlier, like there's something that you experience when you're an employee of the company that is great. Maybe you get it. That's what makes working at company A so much different than company B. But for whatever reason, some companies just cannot figure out how to externalize that value in the right way. They can't articulate it. They can't sell it. So that's where employer brand comes in. And for the record, there are almost 90% of candidates who are checking out your reviews, your career site, your perception online that's directly related to employer brand before they even apply. So before they're even talking to someone in recruiting to get that insider view, they're shaping their own perception about what you are as a company. So when you have a strong employer brand that can kind of define that in a positive way before a candidate even enters your funnel, you have a much higher rate of, getting qualified applicants, that like top talent, that war on talent that we're all constantly, fighting. And you get a lower cost per hire, you get better retention rates. So employer brand is really like, if you can bring it into that talent P&L, if you will, like it's so integral and it's really beneficial.
Yeah, when I was at DoorDash, it's funny because DoorDash is such a big company now, but when I was there, everyone thought Uber was the obvious winner. They had more money than God. Travis was still at the helm. It was move fast, break things everywhere. Everyone was obsessed with like what the office looked like. It was like all these black colors. And literally, our first office in Palo Alto was an old animal hospital. Like literally the conference room was like where they put down dogs. And so we employer brand for me at that point in time, it's the truth. And so the employer brand for me at that point in time was like, we must invest in this now. And if we don't, nobody's gonna because it's so obvious to most humans that Uber is going to win, or they believe it's obvious. So we started doing some things, and I want to get into the how with you. So here's what we did. We updated our career site. We were really intentional about the language that we were using to try and align the language that we were using in our job descriptions and our outreach in every touch point with the candidate with what was actually happening inside the company, because that way it was like, you're either kind of like one of us or you're not. We felt like it was pretty cultish at the time. I remember this company called Job Portraits, and my homie Mickey at Job Portraits to where we brought them in. They did like this like expose on our engineering team, the problems that they were facing, why those problems were really interesting and hard to solve, and why it was going to be like a really big thing. We invested into that. Those were the things that we were doing. Talk to me more about the how. Like, how do you think about people? Like, how should they invest into their employer brand?
I think a lot of those things that you mentioned are spot on. When I'm thinking of like the career site journey and how a candidate is looking at the situation you illustrated, like why would I choose DoorDash over an Uber or a Postmates or whoever the other Deliveroo if you're in Europe? What are the distinguishing factors? It really is selling that unique value proposition that you as the employer provides. Like what sets you apart from everyone else? There's another colleague of mine in employer branding. His name's James Ellis. He's coined the phrase employer blanding instead of employer branding. And I think I love it so much. I think that should be his next book. I wish I could take credit for it. But that's kind of what I think a lot of us are seeing, especially in the tech space. Like you cannot land on a career site amongst the top tech companies, amongst the top retailers, and tell me that anything is distinguishably different in your application process. A lot of the time. I think we see it a lot on Blind as well. Like you see a lot of senior engineers, they'll land in the chat and they'll say, hey guys, I have an offer for a senior engineer role at Pinterest, at Netflix, and at Uber. Comp is this, equity is this. But what's really the difference? Like what's T? They don't really know because they can't distinguish it. It hasn't stood out to them in the process. It hasn't stood out to them in their leadership conversations, and it probably hasn't been presented as such on the career site. So getting into the ways of how you can really like distinguish that as best as possible up front before your candidate's even in process on the career site. I cannot tell you the amount of time I've landed in an organization and there's no video. There's no human faces on the career site. We at our core, we're people. We are storytellers. We want to see another face at the end of this organization we might be signing up for the next 1, 5, 10 years of our life to. We want to see that. Do I belong at that organization? Do these people seem like they're happy in this organization? Does this organization feel, does it feel authentic? They're really trying to get a sense of that. Video, I mean, it's the year of our Lord 2026. If you don't have video going on, you are losing candidates' attention so quickly. So that's kind of an easy lever to turn on. In the span of a year, I did 4 content shoots with Robinhood to update all of that across their sites. All of the things that I saw when I joined were from like 2017 or 2018. Vlad had old long hair. We had to get rid of that. Like we had to update to his new haircut. So there was just so much that needed to be updated across. Like there were a lot of employees in the photographs we had on our LinkedIn were completely, no longer at the company. So those are kinds of quick things that you can turn on and edit. Another part that I really like you said you implemented was in your engineering team. I mean, that's a core business function. Obviously, a lot of hiring is done for developers, engineers, all that good stuff. So investing there and being able to storytell through your own teams and their own experiences at the company, I think is key. One way that we tried to do that also at Robinhood was expanding on our product launches. We had a lot of things launching, obviously all of the time, high growth company. Last year, I think we grew 400%. So digging into a lot of the product launches and extracting those stories from our teams, like, okay, we just launched this new iteration of Robinhood Gold. Just take that for example. What did that look like from a team's perspective? Like, what were some challenges you can maybe, talk about in hindsight? Obviously, nothing that would, break compliance rules. Obviously, nothing too proprietary information that was given away. We had a lot of checks and balances in our editing process. But I think it's really nice to explore that from the employer branding perspective and see how are our employees living the values? How do they empower them to be bold in their decision making? How does that help them to, work so fast and get these new products out to customers literally like every other week? Like there was always something going on. So being able to tell those stories and put those out on our channels so that future engineers, future developers can say like, hey, that's the kind of work I want to be doing. That's the kind of organization I want to be doing. And again, I think that helps close the gap between candidate and customer, because I think so often people who are using our product are the ones who are like, maybe I want to work there.
Help me understand this dissonance in my head, which is, yes, we want to tell the story, but oftentimes that story has like warts that most humans don't want to talk about. So an example would be, we did this product launch for Robinhood Gold Card, and I didn't work at Robinhood, but I can imagine some of the things that were included in that story that we need to think about how we tell these parts, because they are true, is like a bunch of people were staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning. The card didn't ship out to people on time. Like, I think people are really afraid to talk about the things that go wrong, when my take, and I'm curious to get your take, is actually like talking about those things is actually human and humanizes the business and actually what candidates want. What's your view on that?
I agree with a caveat. I think it is important for a company to say authentically who they are upfront. If you have a startup culture that demands, long nights, that demands weekend work, that is going to take some time where you are committing more than 8 hours a day to a role, be honest about that. The worst thing you can do is attract and onboard talent that is expecting a very normal 40-hour a week, 8 to 5 kind of situation, and thrust them into a high impact, high octane kind of environment where it's always on. You may get a call from a leadership, individual at 5 a.m. being like, "What is this, Sev? Get on it right now." And you're like, I was not prepared for this. No recruiter told me this is the situation. So I think authenticity and honesty in the process at all stages is incredibly important. I think that attracts a certain kind of individual and it repels a certain kind of individual. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that really reduces a lot of recruiting friction. I think that saves you a lot of time and effort and dollars in the recruiting process, and ultimately is getting you what you want. It lets that top talent filter themselves in. But I will say the caveat I mentioned, not all of the warts are going to come out in the process. Of course, that's not always something that's going to be shared externally. So I think when you are reading these stories that are put out on a blog, on a LinkedIn page, in a press story, read between the lines. Definitely take everything with a grain of salt. Everything is, looked at through a corporate lens at one stage or another.
That's actually what I want to get into, is like this corporate sanitization. So my personal story is like, when I joined Carta, I was very much of the belief that employees need a sanitized version of the events, because I don't know, that's how things were at Google. Like, you just don't hear all these things, right? Like there's a strong filter. So then I go work for Henry Ward, who is exactly the opposite of that. He is like, tell everybody everything. In one extreme case during COVID, we ran the second layoff at COVID, and he told people 3 weeks before that we were thinking about it in an all hands. I thought it was fucking crazy. I think that one was still crazy. But I would say probably 9 out of 10 times, when you think about the transparency piece with employees, I actually think you should be transparent. You should err on the side of transparency. I am now of the belief that I think you should do that with candidates too, for exactly what you said, which is this my favorite line, which is like, a great talent brand serves as a magnet for those you want to attract and a repellent for those you want to avoid. And so the more you lean into those things, even though they may be non-traditional, shouldn't we do that? Like, shouldn't we show them like how the sausage is made? Like, so why is there so much sanitization then? Like, where is that coming from?
Shareholder value.
Oh, yeah. So yes, that I felt like you just like tapped me on the top of the head and say, "Hey, little Nolan, like that's shareholder value."
In a nutshell, I mean, if we're thinking about it, yes, that is the best ultimate way to do things. I fully agree. I obviously very honest. You're getting all my hottest takes here, but if things got too honest too quickly, people would balk. And it's usually very senior leadership, investors, or stakeholders. They don't necessarily want to be that honest about certain negative outcomes. But I think there are people who appreciate it and there are people who don't at the end of the day. And companies who want to win that war on talent, like I said earlier, and kind of get that great place to work award and really maintain that competitive edge over all of the other tech companies, they can't necessarily let all their warts show, because then they would lose that edge.
Yeah, Kelly, that award is bullshit, right? Like, can we both admit that award is total bullshit? And when you see it, I actually like just be given I've seen the inside of the Matrix. Every time I see that award, I go like something is deeply on fire at that place that no one's allowed to talk about externally, otherwise they get executed. What do you think when you see the award?
If no one knows this yet, who's watching your pod in the world of TA and EB, those awards are all bought and paid for. They are put together in very rigorous campaigns by individuals like myself and cross-functional partners to win for companies months ahead of time with surveys, with demographic work, with all sorts of stuff, and a very hefty price tag.
Okay. I will get off my high horse on this.
No. I think that's okay because I think there's plenty of people who still just don't realize that. And I think that's, it's Googleable data. Again, it's a very public, open fact if someone wants to find it. But in case there is a TA, leader out there in the world who is unaware of that fact, I think it's an important one. They are all either given with, a press junket in mind, hoping for something else down the line, like some of the, little individual, more smaller awards. Or, it's a bigger award that you really have to shell out the cash and the work for.
Yeah, that's such bullshit is how I think about it. So I want to slightly transition into, I think, a even more bullshit topic, which is Glassdoor. So I remember at DoorDash, when I started, I think our score was like 3.3. I also remember deeply remember this one, which was at Carta, kind of like probably like a similar score. And I had to present to the board on our plan to raise the Glassdoor score. Which by the way was not Henry's thing. It was like the board was like, why is this happening, Nolan? And they like obviously chief people officer, like go solve the problem sort of a thing. I guess like, does Glassdoor matter? Should you be trying to like have higher scores? And if you are, how do you do it?
I think Glassdoor does matter because in every candidate search of a company, either they are checking that site amongst blind Reddit and a whole bunch of others, TikToking about your company, like all the things, or they're doing that all in one via a quick ChatGPT or Claude search to get the rundown of all of them. And that is definitely included. There's a stat on Glassdoor that is really telling employees' review of the CEO, which is always quite an interesting one. The feedback given to the leadership team, how political things can be, who's getting promotions, how development really goes. Those are very interesting stories I find on that platform that tell you a lot about how your time at the company can proceed. Getting the number up on Glassdoor is kind of the only way to show your leadership team or your board that measurable improvement in your brand reputation, according to Glassdoor. Like that's the metric. They have the other ones kind of built into it, but overall, they want the external, visible one score that everyone sees when they land on that one page to go up. So yes, I do think that is the communicable metric. Unfortunately, I don't create the rules. I just work in the system around it, just like everyone. But there is a right way and a shady way that many companies go about it. I think one thing that's very interesting, again, we can pull the veil back for a lot of our TA and EB friends. There's a notification on the Glassdoor site that says companies cannot remove bad reviews, which I think for a candidate or for a review giver, for an employee, it feels very like, this is an honest site. This is the true story of everything that goes on at this company. It's very, it gives you that feeling of trust. And that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to build trust between the platform and the end user. However, there are ways in which companies can set up parameters for the reviews so that very inflammatory language can be censored and can be removed. A prior employer of mine did have a similar challenge that you mentioned. Our score was in the trash and they were trying to get it out of there very quickly and wanted to see the strategy by which we could go about doing that. Now, the right approach is to create a cross-functional review. Usually it would be employer brand, talent acquisition, HR, comms, PR. Everyone kind of holds hands and gets a review response strategy. Look at everything going on, establish some common themes, some buckets that we can address maybe sooner, and things that maybe are a longer term plan that are going to be a little bit harder to address. You collect all the reviews at key moments. Maybe there's some according to onboarding, promotion time, exit interviews, or maybe just like candidate interviews. I've definitely seen that be a theme as well. And then you establish a process by which you respond with empathy and actions taken. I do not like when Glassdoor exists as just an inbound. I think companies that do respond tend to see better upticks in their scores. And then also, in effort to kind of get some better reviews into the system, there is a way to authentically incentivize your own employee base to say, hey, it's promotion time, or hey, this is your 1 year anniversary, like positive moments in your own employee life cycle to say, like, did you know you can leave a Glassdoor review at any time?
Yeah. So like if you want the promotion before we give it to you, you must go on and write a review on Glassdoor, right?
I didn't say that, but perhaps that would be a positive movement in their life where they are feeling happy and motivated and incentivized to talk about good things happening for them at the company. Perhaps they've just gotten a stock vest.
Or they're about to get a stock vest. Yeah, I like this. This is exactly what I would do. Okay, keep going. I like this.
The shady way, the quick way to do it, which is unfortunately what my former employer did, is to remove inflammatory language from the reviews. So essentially, you can say, hey, we're noticing themes of words that are coming up that may not be, a curse word, but you can also remove curse words from the reviews because those do pop up. But we're noticing things that are, in our mind, discriminatory language. So in this case, it was slave labor, slave wages, slave driver, things like that. We were able to establish a case. And when I say we, it was not me. I was very against this. There was another person on the team who led this charge. Again, we're team honesty here. I was not for it. I was like, let it ride. If that's what teams are experiencing, that's what should be shown. But suddenly, within a week's time, I think it was 600 plus reviews were suddenly gone from the site. So that is unfortunately a way that you may not be getting the full picture on Glassdoor, but I will say in a lot of cases, it does present a good indicator. Now, one thing I will give that's like maybe a listener tip is just remember, you can write a Glassdoor review at any point in time. Whether you're interviewing at a company, whether you're an employee of a company, whether you're a past employee of a company, it is there for you at any point in your customer or candidate journey. And be creative in your language, not inflammatory. That way, your review cannot get taken down, whether it is critical or complimentary.
So I actually didn't know this. Like, I didn't know you could get any reviews taken off of Glassdoor. Like, maybe that's like Nolan being a non-player character. But help me understand how is inflammatory defined? Like, can I pick any words, or do I have to pick words that like people kind of get like a little weird about?
I don't recall the exact reasoning why these words were something that was able to be taken down. I believe there was a case made for it that it was being discriminatory or a just completely out of pocket word for the company to be using. Yeah, again, this was not my fight. I was like, hey, perhaps that is a accurate description that they are painting based on their own experience, and this is free speech, so why can't we leave it up?
I mean, I kind of like it, Kelly. Like, it's a pretty easy win if you're that person. Like, I get why you're on the right side of the law, but like I could see the other side of the law being like, well, if we want to move the needle, we can move the needle in like 10 days on this thing.
Yeah, it looks great on paper, but at the end of the day, it did not fix anything. That perception still exists. It exists in PR stories about the same company. It exists on other review sites that do not pull it. You can find the same thing on Blind. You can find the same thing on TikTok. So it is a Band-Aid. Unfortunately, some companies do take it. It is not one that I, as a employer brand expert, would ever recommend because it doesn't solve a problem. It just masks a wound.
So I want to talk about that. So your employer brand, I view is actually like more of a mirror. Like, your job is actually to be like a mirror. Maybe actually a better analog would be like the Instagram filter, which like removes some of my wrinkles when I look at that. Isn't that what that is? So like, if I look in the mirror and it looks like I haven't slept in 3 days, Is the mirror going to solve the problem? Like, what do you do?
I think that's so apt. And I think that's why a lot of organizations turn off and on employer brand because sometimes they just don't want to look at the clear image we're presenting back to them. Maybe I'll sugarcoat it, obviously, but I can't tell you, that the sky is purple when it's blue. It doesn't make sense to me. If I'm here to diagnose your talent attraction journey, your employer brand perception, where your reputation is in the trash and how to get it out, and that's what you've brought me on to do, I'm not going to tell you that everything is daisies and unicorns. It doesn't sound like the remit for my role. But sometimes you have an organization that brings in an employer branding, whether it's a team of one, I've very often been a team of one, person to kind of put band-aids on things. They really just do want a quick fix for a, Q1, Q4 goal. And yeah, just kind of solve an issue without getting to the nexus of the problem because the nexus of the problem is a little too hard to look at.
So yeah, basically what they want is Botox, right? It's just like put the needle in, like make my face like look like it doesn't move, and then we don't have to worry about all the other shit. It's like probably an impossible job, right? Because like the things that are under the surface that really piss people off, you can't solve. That's not part of your remit, is it?
It is in cross-functional collaboration. Like if you really have a leadership team, first of all, if the employer brand department and or person is put in a position of leadership to effectively hold hands with your ELT, with your head of comms, marketing, PR, DE&I, HR, TA, like that's where the good things can happen. But I think in some companies, that is not always the case. I think just like a year or two ago, like employer branding people are, again, with recruiting, often a lot of the first being put on the block for layoffs. So it is a little tough. And then we're brought in as contractors or part-time or whatever the case may be, because again, it's just seen as a band-aid. It's not really seen as the strategic partner that it needs to be. But I think moving forward, there was a whole article on this in the Wall Street Journal about like storytellers and how, employer branding, again, going back to it's such a great article, really made the LinkedIn rounds, really communicating that external value of the company, really attracting and building the longevity of the company externally to both candidates and customers. It's such an important role. PR doesn't often have time for that. Marketing doesn't have time for that. TA is, buried in offer accepts and sourcing and, all these other processes that go into their role. And they're already, their teams are quite lean as well. It's a really important strategic position that I really hope more companies are recognizing moving forward.
Isn't the right play to just like lean into it? Like, so when I think about, so like a Carta, I can use this as an example because Henry would agree with me. And we had this discussion. Henry changes his mind. Like he changes his mind. Turns out smart people do change their mind. Also turns out employees hate that because it feels like you're getting put in the wash machine. And it feels like we're swinging the pendulum from one way to the other. And so like actually isn't the best employer brand not running from those things, but saying like, like we change our minds with new data? Like, isn't that the thing to like actually lean into in that case?
I think so. One of the first company I worked for was Nike, and one of their maxims that has stuck with me throughout my entire journey is evolve immediately. If things aren't changing now, I'm uncomfy. I think that was something that was very much ingrained in me in Amazon as well. The business is always changing. We're in a very quickly evolving just time in history, time in the ways of work. So I don't think change has to be regarded as such a bad or negative thing necessarily. It can be perceived as something more like an evolution, more like this is the time to build new skills. This is the time to adapt. This is the time to work more cross-functionally with your partners and, take on new sides of the business. If you are supported to do so by the company, if everyone is sort of aligned on that mission together, I think that works well and that can be externally translated to be very attractive for top talent.
Okay, last topic, and this is about a former employer. So let's see how much we can get into this thing. But Amazon, I think, is a really interesting place to talk about today because they just did another big layoff. Internally, they are talking about eliminating jobs, using AI and robots to get rid of humans. How do you think about like that problem, that employer branding problem for them? Because like in one sense, they're saying we need people to solve these problems today. In another sense, they're saying like in 5 years from now, we're hoping that these people actually don't work here and we fired them.
I don't envy the employer branding team who is there now. I worked there quite a few years ago. But yeah, announcing a very large round of layoffs, which they bumped up in the final day prior to the announcement today, despite ongoing record profits and ongoing hiring simultaneously in strategic areas, I think is a really tough place to be in for TA, for sales, for marketing, for employer branding, for anyone who's trying to show how the company is growing, supporting its people, a great place to work. However much we believe in that award, we do have to kind of, you know, make that comparable indicator as we are attracting top talent. So when the internal reality shows frequent layoffs, psychological discouragement at best, ongoing restructuring, and a lot of instability, it feels. How do you make that an attractive offer? How do you make that the place to choose when a lot of candidates are between multiple offers? I don't know. That wasn't the case when I was there. I think that is a tough sell. If I were considering a role at Amazon versus a Google or a Microsoft, I mean, a lot of companies are doing rolling layoffs. A lot of companies are doing silent firings amongst the rolling layoffs that don't even make the headlines for said purpose. They really don't like those headlines. But it is a tough place to try to continue attracting talent when the reality once you get in the door can be quite destabilizing to one's career.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. Like, here's my view on this is, well, one piece is like right now, I think about this as like a pendulum between of power, and the power is between employer and employee. And during the great resignation, which I haven't heard anybody say in like 3 years, because that ended super fast, that was like, well, I'm never going to go work at Amazon, like terrible employer, like over my dead body.
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, there's very few jobs available for my skill set. And so I think there's just a brutal reality, and especially in white collar tech, like I've said, I've had this take for a few years. I think the next era of social unrest is coming from white collar tech workers who are having a hard time finding jobs because they were paid so well and had such great lifestyles, especially compared to my best friend who's like on electrical poles right now in Louisiana where it's freezing trying to fix that stuff. Like that's real shit. Meanwhile, like I can just like scream on Slack about a bunch of people and make 150K. And so I do think there is like this like come to reality sort of a thing. And it feels to me like the leaders at these companies are saying like, we don't give a shit. Like, we're not going to talk about it. Like, we're not going to intentionally talk about it. We're not going to intentionally leak these stories. But if they get out, they get out, and we have the power, and we're still going to be able to make sure that people come work here, either with the power dynamic that we're currently in or with compensation.
100%. And they're able to still do that because they, A, do hold all the power. B, there really hasn't been any significant pushback. And C, they haven't seen any negative impact in their sales. One way or another, they have proved quarterly growth every single quarter, year on year. And somehow they are able to also pad it, even though they don't need to, but pad it with extra layoffs and extra headcount reductions. So to have all that happen and still continue to be a great place to work or an attractive place to work for candidates, like whether we like it or not, there are still plenty of people who still see Amazon externally as a reputable name, a big company with lots of great infrastructure. They offer good comp, good equity vesting. And that's where some people want that name on their resume to build their career. So I think there is unfortunately maybe still some time left before that internal reality or these things that we're seeing in employee experiences catch up to the candidate side of the equation when we are also in an economic and national situation where people just need work. There are so many talented individuals on the market right now who are like, I can't get a job. I've been on unemployment for, over a year or 2 years, and I make it to the final round with these companies, but then they lose the headcount all of a sudden, or they restructure, or targets change. It is very hard to sides of the equation meet in a way that is, in harmony. It really feels at odds.
Totally. Yeah. And you made the point about Target earlier. The other one that's coming to my mind right now is Budweiser when they went through that thing. And it feels like in both of those cases, what caused the change in the company was actually the company's sales.
Yeah.
And until the company's sales take a hit, it feels like they can act with impunity when you get to that level of brand. Now, when you're a startup, different story, right? Like there's a lot of different, startups to choose from. There's only like a few of these roles at these companies. And so like it is a lot easier to be selective if you're a candidate with a startup versus a big brand. But it does feel like impunity ends when sales decrease.
I agree. That's the only place at the end of the day, when you're that big of a behemoth of an organization, I've worked for a couple, that's the only reason that they would ever have to change is when their sales hit, is when they have to go to shareholders for the first time with a negative quarterly earnings report. I truly don't remember the last time they had one. So I personally don't think that's a reality that we've had previously. Like sometimes what goes up must come down is the reality of the market, as long as I've ever been aware of how the market works. But what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years is constant upticks for certain companies like this. And it's because of these measures. They've padded a lot of their earnings with layoffs, with headcount reductions, with, whatever the case may be. And I just don't think that's sustainable from a business model, from an employer branding perspective. It's not realistic. Everyone's talking about the bubble that's going to burst. Who and when that will happen, no one knows. I think there's a lot of contradictions there.
Kelly, I love this conversation. I love your authenticity and appreciate your candor. Super excited for the world to see this one.